The fancy restaurant buzzed with rich patrons and the clinking of crystal glasses as waiters in black suits danced between tables. But in the corner booth, chaos was seconds away. Margaret Wells, the mayor's wife, laughed mockingly at young Dr. Sarah Chun, accusing her of pretending to be a doctor despite Sarah calmly stating her Harvard credentials, until a sudden heart attack struck billionaire Thomas Blackwood nearby, throwing the restaurant into panic except for Sarah, who rushed in, ignored Margaret's insults, and performed life-saving CPR while others gawked or fled. Though Margaret screamed for a real doctor, Sarah's training kicked in as she crushed aspirin, revived Thomas, and was ultimately defended by the restaurant manager who knew her worth. When Thomas regained consciousness, he whispered. Something chilling. Someone had tried to poison him, and suspicion immediately fell on his eerily calm wife and the mysteriously vanished Margaret. The next day, Thomas revealed to Sarah that he suspected his wife had been slowly poisoning him for months, using a rare toxin Sarah had written about in a research paper, which led to a confrontation in the hospital room where Mrs. Blackwood's cold facade cracked under pressure, especially when a police detective entered and Thomas accused her of attempted murder. As Sarah explained the deadly use of digoxin and caught Linda in a lie, Linda confessed but added a final twisted claim. Yes, she had poisoned Thomas, but not to kill him. Linda started crying real tears now. I was trying to make you sick. Enough to retire. You work 80 hours a week. You never spend time with me. I thought if you got sick, you'd finally slow down. The room went dead silent. I never meant for it to almost kill you, Linda sobbed. I just wanted my husband back. Sarah felt her heart break a little. This was about love? Twisted, wrong love, but still love? Thomas looked shocked. Linda ... Why didn't you just talk? To me? Because you never listen. Money and work are all you care about. Detective Martinez stepped forward. Ma'am, attempted murder is still attempted murder, no matter what your reasons were. As they led Linda away in handcuffs, she looked back at Thomas. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. After they left, the room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Thomas looked at Sarah. Doctor, I owe you my life. Just doing my job. No, Thomas said firmly. You did much more than that. You believed in yourself when nobody else did. And because of that, I'm alive. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. It hasn't been easy. People look at me and see a young woman who doesn't belong. I see a brilliant doctor who saved my life. That's when Sarah realized something. The night before, she had been sitting in that restaurant feeling sorry for herself, letting other people's words hurt her. But when it mattered most, when someone needed her, she didn't hesitate. Mr. Blackwood, she said, can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really invite me to dinner last night? Thomas smiled. Because I knew Linda was going to try something soon. My lawyer told me she'd been asking questions about my will. I wanted witnesses around when it happened. Another twist. You knew? I suspected. But I needed proof. And I needed someone there who could save my life if things went wrong. But how did you know I'd be able to help? Because I did my research too, Dr. Chun. You're not just any heart surgeon. You're the heart surgeon. The youngest person ever to publish research on poison-induced heart attacks. The doctor who saved more lives in 3 years than most do in 10. Sarah felt dizzy. You planned all of this? I planned to expose my wife. I didn't plan on almost dying. But I knew if anyone could save me, it would be you. Just then, Margaret Wells walked into the room. She looked embarrassed and ashamed. Dr. Chun, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. Sarah looked at the woman who had been so mean to her just 24 hours ago. I was wrong about you, completely wrong. You saved Mr. Blackwood's life, and I was horrible to you, Mrs. Wells. No, let me finish. My husband always told me women couldn't be doctors. But you know what? My husband is an idiot. Sarah couldn't help but smile a little. I want to make this right, Margaret continued. I'm on the board of City Hospital. We've been looking for a new head of heart surgery. Someone young and brilliant. And brave. Sarah's eyes went wide. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you the job, if you want it. Sarah looked at Thomas, who was grinning. Did you plan this too? Maybe, he said with a wink. But the biggest twist was still coming. 3 months later, Dr. Sarah Chun was settling into her new office as the youngest head of heart surgery in the city's history. She had saved dozens of lives already. The whole hospital respected her now. That's when her assistant knocked on the door. Dr. Chun? There's someone here to see you. A young woman walked in. She looked nervous and scared, just like Sarah had felt not so long ago. Doctor, my name is Maria Rodriguez. I just graduated from medical school, and nobody will hire me because I'm too young. Sarah smiled and gestured to a chair. Sit down, Dr. Rodriguez. Tell me about yourself. As Maria talked about her dreams and her struggles, Sarah remembered that night in the restaurant, how alone she had felt, how ready she was to give up. But sometimes, life puts you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes the people who doubt you end up needing you the most. Dr. Rodriguez, Sarah said, how would you like to be my assistant head of surgery? Maria's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really, but I have one condition. Anything. Promise. Me you'll never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. Promise me you'll always believe in yourself, even when nobody else does. Maria nodded, crying happy tears now. As Sarah watched the young doctor leave her office with new hope in her eyes, she thought about how much had changed. Linda Blackwood was in jail, but she was getting help for her problems. Thomas had retired and was spending his time helping young doctors get started in their careers. Margaret Wells had become one of Sarah's biggest supporters, helping other women get into medical school. And Sarah? She wasn't the scared young woman from that restaurant anymore. She was exactly who she was meant to be. Her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Emergency at the Grand Hotel. Rich people being mean to a young nurse. Thought you might want to handle this one personally. Sarah grabbed her coat and smiled. Some things never change. But now she knew something she didn't know before. She belonged everywhere she chose to stand. The ambulance sirens were already wailing as Dr. Sarah Chun walked out into the night, ready to save another life and change another world. Because that's what doctors do. That's what she did. And nobody would ever make her forget it again. Sometimes the people who doubt us the most are the ones who need us most. Sometimes our biggest challenges become our greatest victories. And sometimes being exactly who you are is the most powerful thing you can be. And so, Dr. Sarah Chun became more than just a surgeon. She became a symbol. A beacon for every young woman told she wasn't enough. For every doctor judged by their age or their appearance. For every person who had ever been underestimated. News outlets picked up the story. Young doctor saves billionaire, then solves the crime. But Sarah never sought the spotlight. Instead, she focused on her patients, her team, and mentoring the next generation. Her surgical team grew, filled with diverse, passionate doctors who had once been overlooked. Each one chosen not for where they came from, but for the fire in their hearts. And when a national medical conference invited her to speak as the keynote guest, she stood on that stage with poise, scanning a crowd of thousands. She didn't talk about fame or success. She talked about fear, about doubt, and about how she overcame both by stepping forward when it mattered most. You don't have to be loud to be powerful, she told them. You just have to be ready when the moment comes. And somewhere in the back row, a shy young woman in scrubs whispered to herself, maybe I can do this too. Because Sarah hadn't just changed one life that night in the restaurant. She'd started a ripple one that would echo across hospitals, classrooms, and generations. A reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it kneels beside. A stranger presses a hand to a chest and saves the world in silence. Just when Dr. Sarah Chun thought her life had found its rhythm. A mysterious letter shattered her sense of stability. A plain envelope slipped under her office door with no return address. No signature, just 6 ominous words. You missed one. They know. Her heart pounded as she read it again and again, trying to decipher its meaning. The next day, Thomas Blackwood arrived at her office, pale and visibly shaken, revealing that someone had broken into his private safe and stolen a confidential list. Names of wealthy and powerful men who had been targeted by a hidden ring of conspirators, possibly including his wife Linda, suggesting she hadn't acted alone but was part of a much larger, coordinated effort to poison and manipulate their way into inheritance, control, or silence. As Sarah listened, the pieces clicked into place: unexplained heart attacks, sudden retirements, missing medical records, and she realized that what she'd thought was a single isolated tragedy was actually the tip of something far more sinister, a pattern of carefully masked medical crimes. Despite the rising danger, Sarah refused to back down and immediately contacted Detective Martinez, determined to open a formal investigation. Even as a second letter arrived, this time more threatening. Back off or you're next, doctor. But instead of fear, Sarah felt fire in her chest, because she had already survived the doubt, the insults, the near-death emergencies, and now she would take that same resolve into the shadows of corruption and deceit, using her medical expertise and growing influence to uncover the truth. Calling upon her team of young, brilliant doctors who had once been overlooked just like she had, Sarah formed a covert task force within the hospital, quietly combing through suspicious deaths, hospital records, and autopsies flagged as natural causes, determined to expose the silent assassins who believed they were untouchable. And as the investigation grew, so did the resistance. Sarah's office was ransacked, her computer hacked, and her assistant followed home. But each threat only strengthened her resolve, because Dr. Sarah Chun was no longer just a heart surgeon. Saving one life at a time, she was a warrior dismantling a secret empire, scalpel in one hand, evidence in the other, reminding the world that real power doesn't come from money, or titles, or bloodlines. It comes from the courage to stand when no one else will, and from the choice to speak truth, even when your own heartbeat might be the next one on the line. As Sarah dug deeper, the conspiracy began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. Names she recognized began surfacing in old hospital files, quiet settlements, and sudden promotions of medical staff who had ignored protocols or altered toxicology reports. The web stretched far beyond wealthy spouses and into hospital administrators, private labs, and even a handful of medical examiners who had been paid to look the other way. Sarah realized this wasn't just a criminal network, it was a system, decades in the making, designed to quietly eliminate obstacles and rewrite narratives under the guise of natural causes and medical anomalies. Then, during a routine follow-up with one of Thomas Blackwood's former colleagues, an elderly CEO, who'd suffered a near-fatal heart event, Sarah noticed the same markers she had seen before. Subtle irregularities in enzyme levels that only someone with her exact training would detect. She ordered a reanalysis of the man's blood, bypassing the hospital's usual channels, and when the independent results came back, they confirmed it. The same digoxin-based compound, engineered to mimic a heart condition but timed to vanish before most tests would catch it. The evidence was undeniable, and Sarah now had her first clear link between two victims. But before she could report it, her lab technician, Dr. Alicia Benning, vanished, her apartment ransacked, her phone wiped clean, and her car found abandoned outside the city. The message was clear: stop, or the next disappearance would be Sarah's. But instead of retreating, Sarah held a press conference, standing in front of a wall of medical files and names of the dead, declaring that a network of targeted poisonings was operating within the elite circles of power, and that she would not stop until justice was served, calling for a federal investigation into a decade's worth of unexplained cardiovascular deaths in high-value individuals. The story exploded nationwide, and while many dismissed it as sensationalism, survivors, whistleblowers, and even former conspirators began coming forward, their guilt and fear no longer strong enough to silence their truths. Amid death threats, fake malpractice suits, and attempted bribes, Sarah stood firm. And when the Department of Justice finally opened a formal inquiry naming Sarah as their chief medical advisor, she knew the tide had turned. She wasn't just proving her worth anymore, she was rewriting the rules. And with every hidden autopsy uncovered, every silenced nurse who finally spoke, every widow who realized her husband hadn't died of bad luck, Sarah was carving a new future for medicine, one where no life would be ignored because of a quiet signature, no voice dismissed because it came from a young woman, and no crime buried beneath wealth and white coats ever again. The case reached a boiling point when an anonymous source leaked a spreadsheet to Sarah's team names, dates, dosages, and payments, all tied to a clandestine medical consultancy known only as Orchid Protocol. It operated under the guise of elite end-of-life services, but was in fact a contract system for calculated medical eliminations, quiet exits for those whose wills, companies, or power had become inconvenient. Sarah's blood ran cold as she scanned the list. Some of the names were already famous: CEOs who died peacefully in their sleep, judges who'd suffered sudden cardiac arrests, and even a senator whose heart had failed just days before a crucial vote. But what stunned her most was finding her own name at the very bottom. No date, no status, just a red pending. Her hands trembled as she realized the truth. She wasn't just fighting the system, she was now a target of it. With federal agents now working alongside her and Detective Martinez embedded in the task force, Sarah launched a full sweep of the hospital's internal servers. They uncovered encrypted communications, off-the-books patient transfers, and falsified medical records, all leading back to a single IP address, headquarters of a private biotech firm tied to Linda Blackwood's brother, who had quietly taken over the company following her arrest. The deeper Sarah went, the more it became clear that Linda had been just one tentacle of a far larger organism, and the Blackwoods were merely the doorway. But Sarah had something the Orchid Protocol hadn't anticipated: a growing army of doctors, nurses, patients, and journalists who now believed in her mission. Medical schools began teaching her poison detection protocols. Survivors began testifying publicly. And when a grand jury indicted 15 Orchid executives for conspiracy, fraud, and murder, the system cracked wide open. Sarah testified before Congress not just as a witness, but as a symbol of what medicine could be when wielded with integrity instead of greed. Her story went global, inspiring reforms in hospitals around the world. The Grand Palace Hotel, where it all began, erected a statue in her honor, not just for the life she saved, but for the lives she protected after that night. And though Sarah continued to walk the halls of her hospital with the same coat and same resolve, people now whispered her name not with doubt, but with reverence. Because Dr. Sarah Chun had proved that when truth is buried under power, it takes one brave heartbeat to bring it back to life, and she was that heartbeat. Years later, Dr. Sarah Chun stood on the stage of an international medical summit, accepting the Global Humanitarian Award with tears in her eyes and thunderous applause in her ears. Behind her, a screen displayed faces survivors she had saved, families she had reunited, and young doctors she had mentored. As she looked out over the crowd, Sarah thought of the girl she used to be, the one mocked in a restaurant, doubted by peers, overlooked by society. And yet, that night when she chose to act, to trust her training, to stand tall in the face of cruelty, had become the turning point not just in her career, but in the course of medical justice itself. After her speech, she stepped off stage and into a hallway filled with new faces, young doctors from every corner of the world who now saw her as proof that conviction matters more than credentials, that courage can come from anywhere, and that sometimes the most powerful change begins with the quiet decision to do the right thing, especially when no one else will. As she walked past the crowd, one young girl ran up to her, clutching a worn copy of Sarah's memoir, eyes wide. "With hope, do you think I can do what you did?" she asked. Sarah smiled, placed a hand on the girl's shoulder, and said, "You won't do what I did, you'll do more." Then she turned and walked into the future she helped build, one patient, one truth, one heartbeat at a time. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about healing and hope, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a reminder that change is always possible. Hit the bell icon so you never miss more powerful stories that blend heart, wisdom, and transformation. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.